the narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. This is episode 242. I'm joined tonight by Justin Troop and Chris Morgan.
I am indomitable.
Happy birthday, 40k.
It's going to be a great show. On this episode, we'll talk for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to play a segment with myself and Mike Brandt, and after that, going to do a spot with Scary from the Scarcast, going over some how to deal with Dark Eldar, because they are a true menace. I actually played them tonight. Played against his specific list, actually, because I assume that people will be playing it. And it was playing an ITC mission format, and it's great in that format. So if you're curious about how it's been, you may have heard him on his own show. We're talking on some other stuff. We kind of go over some tactics and stuff around it and things to watch out for in this episode. But first, we're going to do a section with Mike Brand here in a couple minutes, then a section with Scary, and then we're going to come back and talk about some endless spells from the Age of Sigmar. That's the new cinematic magic effect for some of the spells. It's a specific thing that wizards can do. I put a couple of them together today. They go together in minutes. You can see some of the stuff up on Twitter at Warmaster_TPM, where I put together what I thought were two of the most awesome spells, and I haven't showed them yet up on Twitter, but you'll see them from other folks. But we'll talk about them in this segment after this. But we're playing for the ATC this weekend, having an ATC test tournament with the Wrong Way kids at my house this weekend.
At home basement tournaments. Gotta love that.
Going to be rolling dice with some of the best players around. Going to be real competitive and getting ready for this major tournament coming up not that long from now.
And saving a bunch of money on hotel.
I think I finalized my Eldar list. I've made a couple of changes. I'm down to 4 flyers. 3
Okay, I was going to ask if you added more.
I didn't. I think I wanted to have a couple of more boots on the ground, as it were. And that, it got me thinking, and also a couple of comments. We've been advocating a lot of gallants. There is the rule of 3 in match play. I'm sure everyone caught that. But no, I was speaking of 5 flyers, I had originally in the list 3 Hemlocks and 2 Crimson Hunter Exarchs. And now I think I've dropped 1 Crimson Hunter Exarch because it's a fairly inexpensive model for points wise. I mean, it's not that expensive, but what it does equate to is a whole nother squad of Guardians or something else to do a little objective claiming. Or sometimes, like, heck, in this game that I just played, I opted to soul burst some Guardians instead of Dark Reapers because the Dark Reapers were damaged. They were, down a few numbers, but having all those shuriken catapults on the table sometimes is just what you want. Plus the ability to score objectives. I think that's what I've settled on. I think I've settled on the list, but we'll see how it fares in this tournament coming up this weekend. And, got time before we have to submit the list to lock them in.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big things. We've talked with several people about what tournament prep is like. I know you talked with Jeff Robinson quite a bit about it. And these little tweaks and refinements that come from playtesting, that's information, that's practice, that's ideas that you can't get just playing a game in your head. You have to see it on the table.
Yeah, it really is where you get the ability to, because you never know, you're not going to mentally prepare for every single situation, because you just don't see it, and you're not in the mind of another opponent. And so nothing replaces the playtesting. Absolutely nothing replaces, to your point. We'll see how this goes. I've been painting a lot. Did some scenery prep again for the tournament. Should be good times. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Mike and then Scary, and then we'll come back and we'll be talking about the endless spells from Age of Sigmar.
Sounds good.
You're listening to Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special segment of Forge Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy. I'm joined this afternoon by Mike Brandt.
Hey, it's good to be here, Paul. How are you?
Man, thanks for joining me. Now, you're known for lots of things, including starting Nova and all the good work you guys do on that side and just involvement in the community. But I want to, by the way, great. I think you already sold out on the Grand Tournament tickets this year, and we're well in advance.
We did. 40K is going crazy right now, so
man, that is
exciting times.
That's coming up. And tell me, what are the dates?
It's Labor Day weekend every year. So this year, if I recall correctly, I think that is August 29th, the Wednesday, is when you can first check in. And I think we have the GW preview event. And then we go all weekend through the 2nd. And yeah, I mean, we have over 100 different gaming tournaments, all sorts of systems, a bunch of seminars. And this year, The newest ad is we take over the top level of the hotel. It used to be a restaurant. We turn it into a big charity bar, charity lounge.
Oh, wow.
And this year we have comedians and live music every single night.
Holy crap. That is awesome.
Should be cool.
So I want to talk to you about your accomplishment. Like, you're accomplished on the table, on the game table, and you recently went to the London Grand Tournament and basically wrecked face.
I would never say wrecked face. I had a good showing.
I'm going to say wrecked face.
It was a good time. It was tough. Random or not, I somehow got paired against nothing but ETC players and ETC captains. Starting with the random round 1 pairing, so that was fun.
Sounds awfully random to me.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. The event, has obviously had some issues that have come up after the fact, but nothing like that. I don't even mean to cast aspersions in the slightest.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to Zach, who's put that thing together. He's a great guy and he's doing his best. It's just early years. You always have growing pains. I mean, if someone were to Google feedback on Nova in its second and third year, it would be all kinds of things that we could get better at. And he will. He's a great guy, and it was an exciting thing for Europe, is my understanding. I think they've never had an event of that size at all.
Yep.
And you end up with 400 some tickets sold in advance and 360 some players showed up. It was at Queen's Olympic Stadium outside of London, so it was this big, mass marketed event. It had a lot of cool things going on for it. So it was fun to play in. It was fun to play. I went, and you figure London GT, it's in England, it's in the capital, and I played a Scotsman, a Welshman, a Swede, a Dane. I didn't play an Englishman until the very last round.
Great. So if you were in America, that's like you've covered somebody down from Florida, from Maine.
Yeah. That's about right. But we'll call it was multinational,
No, it is. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, you're right. The accomplishment should not be lost. The fact that this was an organized event, that tons of people came from multiple countries, and it's going to reoccur. They're going to learn from this. It's going to grow. It's going to, in a good way, in a positive way. And it's going to be awesome.
There is a small selfish part of me that hopes it doesn't grow so that I can always say I won the biggest GT in Europe ever.
Right. Maybe for a couple years. Maybe they'll shrink it down. Get the tables tightened up.
It'll be good. He's got the terrain now, so he's just a matter of squaring up, polishing off the edges, getting things straightened out. And should be bigger than ever next year.
This is I mean, I know I'm sure you play in between there, but this is also coming off a good run for you at the LVO this year. So this is not a one-off. This is not a fluke, a coincidence, or whatever. You are a good player and doing really well on the table.
Thank you for saying that. It's been good. It's been a good year. And I had not been I used to play GTs religiously back in late 4th edition, 5th edition, and early 6th edition. And I'll be honest, I really did not like what 6th and then eventually 7th turned into. And at the same time, I took up 2nd edition Malifaux for a while, and got into the tournament scene for that and did well. And so I hadn't been to a 40k grand tournament for several years until the Battle for Salvation last year. And I kind of got, I started to hear people, I've always been an okay player, but I started to hear people say, well, I don't know about your missions, you don't really play, which even if I'm playing every Monday night, if you're not out in the scene, there's a lot of people.
You're not playing on camera. You're not playing.
Yeah, you're not playing at all. So it was, and I play in a tough crowd. So the locals include Andrew Gagno and Tony Kopak is my playtesting partner. And, so there's a lot of very, very good players that are my regular. I mean, I unfortunately don't get many softies, although it'd be nice once in a while when we're just trying to have a beer, not to have to try so hard. But
right.
The long and short is that I kind of thought, okay, well, it's going to be tough to do because I've got a wife, I've got a life, I've got Nova, I've got a job, all that stuff. But I'm going to try to go to hit a bunch of tournaments. So I did BFS, did well there, did LVO, which was great. Alex knocked me out in the quarterfinals, but making the finals was exciting because it was Vegas. Then Adepticon teams, we, did Best Heretic, and that was a good showing. I was fortunate enough to get to play with not just Tony, but with Sean Naden, who's Captain America, and with Kurt Klaus, who's on. So it was kind of like getting to play with Team America.
Just such good dudes. Real
yeah,
good dudes.
And they really are. They're top class. And, then LGT, which was a caveat on LGT. There were 12 people that went undefeated. I happened to get the best battle score plus a little bit of extra paint score. So I won, quote. But, I was more pleased by getting to play 5 phenomenal games against 5 of the best players in the world than I was by, getting the trophy. But the trophy was pretty cool. It's fun to jokingly say I beat Europe.
If I can break it down just a little bit, like there were 12 undefeated people, but that's just the nature of that many people with that few games.
Exactly.
But you, I mean, not that you knew that going in. That is what it is. And
I did.
So you knew to win. You had
stoked
to have that. You had to have the paint. You had to have the other stuff.
It's true. And I was just stoked to win more games than I lost. It's always, I was having a chat earlier today. I forget somewhere on Facebook, but someone was talking about how they want to just win one GT. And the thing I told them, which I think is true, is you can play well enough and practice well enough and also just have the right attitude to consistently do well, to consistently go 4-2, 5-1, 6-0. You can never be good enough to win a GT. And what I mean by that is there's nobody who's ever won a GT just because they were so much more amazing than everyone else in the field. They do it because a little bit of luck goes their way and they're good enough to be in the running, to have a shot at it.
Yep.
That finals game, the semifinals game, they still have to have a couple things go their way or not the other guy's way.
We do still roll dice. I mean, that's basically
it's a dice game.
Opponent, right?
And it's it's a matchup game. Sometimes you play the wrong army in the wrong round, and so anyway, I use a
poker analogy a lot, and it's essentially you see the same people making it to the top 16 or the cash. They get over the line and making the money, but they're not always going to win the thing.
Yep. And it was a funny we finished the last round and I had known I didn't have enough. I was like 5 battle points off max. So, and I knew there was some guy who'd gotten max battle points. And so I was like, well, he's going to win the tournament. And I was just stoked. I got to be on TV a couple times. That was neat. I didn't use any water bottles or anything in the process. So that was also neat. With sorry, Alex, but Alex is a great guy, but cameras are cameras. So there was a huge event and it was packed into some comparatively small spaces at times. So Jeff Robinson had won the Invitational. He and I were hanging out kind of at the back of the pack at the award ceremony, and we couldn't really hear anything. So we didn't really know, they just started, and we didn't know that they decided they would do 40K first to get people out of there because we couldn't hear anything. Mm-hmm. So everyone starts leaving, and we're like, what happened? And they're like, oh, the awards are done. And we're like, what? We couldn't hear a thing the whole time. And you kind of look at each other like, do we just not? What do we do? I guess, and I'm like, oh, I just must have placed like
awkwardly creep up towards the microphone.
Yeah. So I went to go say goodbye to them, and they were like, hey, congrats. And I was, for what? And go, you won. I'm like, what did I win? No, you won. So that was entertaining because, Jeff and I were both like a little flabbergasted and, went over and grabbed the trophies, and it was fun. It was overall, a pretty exciting time, and it was cool to see so many people in Europe. And
London's a cool city.
It is. And people miss this every time, but the reason you go to these events is because the community of people who travel to these events, by and large, are amazing people. My third opponent, Daniel Hesselberg on Team Sweden, he's awesome. And we spent, hours and hours that night hanging out. I'd met him that morning randomly as he was having his like bajillionth beer of the previous 24 hours of not sleeping. He's a crazy man. But
everyone has their rituals. Everyone has their...
They do. And that community is so cool. Things like where you and I run into each other at the tournaments, high five or shake hands or whatever. That's really what they're about. And so that was my favorite part of it. I mean, it was another 360 gamers who are all peers and friends and have similar backgrounds and interests. And
I'm making it a point on my show now to do a player spotlight, like more regularly than I have. Like ones like this to showcase just the fine people that you will encounter at these tournaments. It's so easy to, we made a joke about some behavior or whatever that we don't like, don't appreciate, but that is such the minority of the time or the things that you're going to encounter. And I'm now making it a point to showcase, again, like I said, some of the fine folks that you're going to encounter at these tournaments, and you'll see them at multiple tournaments. It's now granted the community is growing for 40K tournament players, but you're still going to see familiar faces at almost every single one of these.
You are. And I always tell people I met my wife because I went to and hosted tournaments. There's all the volunteers for Nova have become my closest friends. Several of them were in my wedding party. I met my wife at a Halloween party that one of them had hosted one year. Going to these events is not just, I'm going to play with other gamers like you might if you go to the local game store for an RTT. It's really a community. So not to rant, we're like kind of like all over the place, but that's maybe a good thing. It's just, if you haven't done it, if you're one of the listeners and you're like, I don't know, I see these people cheating. It's really at the event. It's a bunch of people playing games and also spending every free minute around the games, hanging out, having a drink together, going and grabbing food together, talking about life, sharing how things have been.
That's the best part, finding some little to us, some kind of restaurant that you don't have back home.
Exactly.
Like in Chicago, the Portillo's or what have you. London is full of those types of places. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And the Indian food in England in general is amazing. For the record, anyone that goes there.
Very true. Very true. And where I mean, who knows where the event will be next year? But that's a cool area near. Everything's near some type of easy to find transportation. You can get plenty of places in cities like London.
It is. Well, and we also took a 2-hour train ride after the event to Nottingham.
Heck yeah.
We had a playtesters meeting with some of the design crew. Obviously, I can't talk about it, but the game's going to get even cooler. I mean, like even more amazing as time goes on. And we got to see Warhammer World, which is super cool, and go to the oldest bar in the world at the old trip to Jerusalem there in Nottingham. So
yeah, been there. There's plenty of places that claim to be the oldest pub, but it is a cool place.
It is an old pub. We'll go with that.
Oh no! Hey, it's printed on the wall that it's the oldest. Who are we to argue?
They've got. I don't know. I don't think we can. We can.
Did you go to the catacombs under there?
We're gamers. We'll argue about it somehow.
Yeah. Oh right. I did not go to the catacombs, but as I understand it, there are tunnels under it that like go.
I did not know that. Yeah. I do know that they had it was like a brewery back in the 900s first for the castle. So maybe, man, I have a reason to have to go back again. Dang it.
They are short. I'll say that.
So they gave us a shield. They gave me a shield for winning the London GT. It's the shield. They pass it around, and you have to you get inscribed with your name.
Okay.
So I plan to bring that around to all the events I hopefully can get out to. So maybe we'll have to make everybody sign it, even though they would kill me if I did that.
Right, comes back.
Yeah, I have to
somebody from all 50 states has signed this.
Yeah, it would feel like from America would love.
Well, let's talk about your games. I mean, I don't want to get, or we don't have to get. I shouldn't say I don't want to get. We don't have to get specific over the games themselves. But it was a Maelstrom. Was it a Maelstrom mission environment?
Yeah, it was an interesting mission environment. Every round had an Eternal War mission from either the core rulebook or chapter approved, and it had a Maelstrom mission from either the core rulebook or chapter approved. And one of those rounds was just straight kill points plus Maelstrom. And most rounds had a kill point element in play, which when I went in, I was sure I was going to get shellacked on because the older school ETC, and I don't know if it's still this way, they capped the kill point differential. So someone could only ever get +6 points on you for kill points. But this was not capped. It was just raw kill points in every round. And I had a 32 kill point army that looked and felt like an army. I had the only 4 Tauroxes in the entire tournament. 360 players. There were some Taurox primes. I had the only 4 just plain Jane BS4 Tauroxes. And then I had, the bike shield captains, and I had 2 Slamguiniuses, and I had some scouts, and then the rest of the army was just Catachan characters and 80 Catachan infantry. And it was cool. It looked like an army on the tabletop instead of looking like a weird, spam list or something.
I really appreciate that using Catachans. I mean, I've always said they're the best, but
they are. I will go to the grave. See, people use Cadians because they get a little bit better shooting, especially for that one round against Chaos or whatever. But or just in general. But the thing with Catachan is they don't shoot that much worse. It's still a bunch of shots with orders and everything. But then they throw the same number of attacks at strength 4 in combat. And so, to talk about the games a little bit, like the first game was against Neil Powell. He's a Scottish ETC guy. He's a very cool dude who I've been a little bit in chat with afterward because I think we kind of buddied up. But he was running a 36 orc cannon and mech gun weird list that had it had 86 units once it was deployed, and it had again 18 of the super cannon things that shoot the D6 strength 8 AP3 shots, and then it had 18 cannons, just the missile launcher equivalents, and then it also had a handful of orcs, but not really that many, like a couple boy squads and a couple storm boy squads and jump packs or commandos, and then 3 weird boys for trying to smite things. And he had some funny comments about my list before the game started, like, what are you trying to do with Tauroxes kind of thing.
You'll see.
Yeah, and I kind of hugged him. So that was the game plan with the Catachans, and what was useful about them is between the Catachans and the number of combat capable characters I had kind of hiding amidst them, I sort of just got into and started hugging his guns so that they couldn't really shoot anything.
Yep.
And so they did their work, but I kind of just started to get a lead on him and kind of pressured him from the get-go. He never really got out of his deployment zone. And that was the only
moved everything up, including the captains and everything else. And
yeah. Okay. And that was the only game that was not going to go to time. We both had tons and tons of stuff, and he had a lot of shots to roll every turn. But we got through, I think, turn 3 or 4, and then we kind of just talked through it. And that was an 18-2 win. So the way that the scoring worked is, if I scored 79 points in the game and you scored 7, then our differential would equate to enough to be a 20-0 win, which was a quote max game.
Yep.
So I think this game, even though we only got to 3 or 4 turns, because of how many kill points that were on the table, the score was, and Maelstrom we were scoring a lot. The score was something like 50 to, 35 or something, and the differential equated to an 18-2 for me.
You were slugging it out with each other, essentially.
Oh yeah, there was all kinds of stuff dead. So that was a good game. It was that and my last game were probably my two hardest games, which was not what I expected when you look back, or when I was entering each game. So when I entered that game, I actually thought it would go kind of like it did. I figured he had enough kill points that I would kill Gretchen to make up for any differential he got by shooting down my infantry or my tanks. And it worked out that way. And then I got a big lead because the characters would go in and, they'd kill a gun or two, and then they'd fight twice and kill another couple guns. And so,
do you mind after this running down what's in your list? I mean, I know, but I don't think we specifically told people, so they can just kind of mentally follow along.
Yeah, I'll send it along after we get done.
Okay.
So second round was the most surprising. It was the pure kill point and Maelstrom round. So there was no objective other than the Maelstrom objectives, and everything else was just straight kill points. And as I mentioned, I had 32 in my list, and I was playing up against James Ramsey, who's a phenomenal Welsh player. He's on the Wales ETC team. He's actually been in Nova before as well. And I really quite like him. All of my opponents were lovely. It was maybe the highlight of it all, is that it was 5 games between top tier players playing very, very tough games, but every single game was incredibly genteel and full of, hey, I knew what you meant to do there. Go ahead. That kind of stuff. So they stood out because they were phenomenal games. They were extremely high level games, but they were also very lovely games. I mean, they were gentleman hammer in every respect, which was good. And the game with James was like that. And it was a weird game because, like I said, it was straight kill points. I had 32 kill points. He had, the Nurgle list. He had 3 squads of plague drones. He had 3 squads of plague bearers and some characters. And that was his army. And he had a couple trees. And so when it started, it was like, well, I don't know. In my army, when you see it, it doesn't really shoot. I have four Toroxes that shoot if they don't move, hitting on 4s with some autocannon shots. And I have las guns and mortars and like a couple hurricane bolters. And I don't have a lot of mortars. I have like 11 mortars. And that's it.
I don't want to downplay that. That's a lot of shots.
It's shots. But it's low quality shots. And the list is really a combat list. So every game, it was for the most part about board control and about me punching things to death. And this game was the same way. And weird as it is, I don't know why. I never really blobbed my guard squads before this game, but I was like, I don't know how I'm going to keep from shedding 1 million kill points while trying to kill like 1 plague drone squad.
You mean using like the stratagem that...
Yeah, the combined squad.
I can't remember the name of the stratagem off the top of my head, but it's
combined squad.
The one command point thing that lets you bring a squad together.
Yep. So I got to go first, and I shot, across the board at him, and I killed a plague drone. And I blobbed one of my squads and used them to sort of like start to form a screen that had depth as well as width, so that he couldn't move any jump models over to touch tanks and things like that. And so by the time he got in on turn 2, I had blobbed again, and so I had a big 30-man squad in the way of his 2 healthy plague drone units. And on the other side of the board, he had 1 unit that I had shot everything at for 2 turns, and so it was down to like 5 models instead of 8 or 9 or whatever it was. And push came to shove, he kind of ran into the net, as it were, with 18 plague drones, and they killed lots of guardsmen, but they didn't kill all of the guardsmen.
Well, Nurgle is not known for their ability to kill things. They're known for their ability to hang out. Now, I know everyone, as soon as I said that, people are going to go, well, my list does. Yes, you can. You can build it up that way. But like the list you're talking about is like a brick list.
Yep. And it worked out that way. So the Catechins, I overwatched with the anti-chaos stratagem you can use on overwatches. So it did a number of wounds, and then they charged and fought, 1 unit fought, and then I interrupted and threw. Because I had Strachan and the Priest near the Catechins, every Catechin was throwing 3 strength 4 attacks. So I think I had like 15 left, and they threw into the squad that hadn't fought yet. They threw 3 Sarges, 15 plus, another 12 guys, 36, so 51 attacks at them.
Mm-hmm.
And that, clipped a few more of the guys. And so they survived. Like 7 or 8 Catechins left. Obviously, I passed morale with my command points. And the game kind of went like that. It took me a few turns, but I killed all the plague drones with the characters, which are just sitting in there with a total of about, 70 strength, 6, 7, 8 AP, 3, D3 damage combat attacks. And so they kind of mowed through the plague drones with the counterpunch.
I had personally not used Strachan before. But it was
good.
No, I agree. I just I kind of go with more of a block defense screens for some of the guns. But I really like how your list came about, and I think Strachan fits perfectly in there.
He does, and he's an okay fighter. But the key is that every little company commander for 38 points with a power fist is 5 attacks because you keep them within 6 of the Priest and Strachan, and all of a sudden you have 4 of those characters, so that's 20 power fist attacks, and you've got your 2 Slam Gwinius that can fight twice and all that, and you've got your 3 shield captains. So the list is kind of sneaky because everyone assumes it's guards, so it's shooties, and they got 4 Toroxes. I don't know what's up with that. So they feel pressure to run at you, and they do, and then, they kind of get...
Then they realize you're strength 4 with all these attacks and not going anywhere, and then the characters come in from the flanks and start chewing things up.
Yep, the characters just kind of pick and choose, and they kill what they hit, and then the catechins sort of slowly die elsewhere while the characters mow through. So somehow that game finished, and I lost 0 units.
Wow.
I still don't really know how that happened.
Wow.
But, so that was weird. That was a 20-0. I don't know. Again, I really don't know how that panned out the way it did, but I'm not complaining.
You talk about one little bit of luck. That might have been it. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it sounds like you had the upper hand.
Definitely a little bit of luck here and there in that game. Especially times where catechins made just enough saves to not get wiped, all that kind of stuff.
When those t-shirts come, I mean, they're flak vests, but they're t-shirts with catechins.
We soaked them in antiseptic before the game. Go with that. Round 3 was the most painful. It was on Warhammer TV, but I got lucky in that round 3 had no kill points. And round 3 was just basically Maelstrom and endgame objectives, and it was up against a triple Tesseract Vault plus Deceiver plus Destroyer Lord plus 9 Scarabs list. And that thing is horrible to play against. Daniel Hesselberg was amazing as an opponent. Watching a guy stand there and go, okay, and now I storm you, and now I thunder you, and now I cosmic you, and just like
3 mortal wound powers.
Pick up. And you're just kind of you're like standing there like, okay, what do I pick up next? And it'll tell you to pick up more things. I only killed one of the vaults, and when I killed it, it was catastrophic, it exploded. And he killed lots of my stuff, but the game only gave you Maelstrom cards if you controlled for each objective you controlled at the start of your turns. So I basically took it to the chin, but made sure I always had all the objectives and that he did not have any. Yeah. And so I just kept racking up Maelstrom points.
You have 32 units, and he has 5.
Exactly. And so at the end of the game, it was 39-2.
I guess.
Yeah, and he had two vaults, and I had most of my army, like, in some capacity alive, but most of my characters had gotten beat up trying to keep, the vaults occupied. But 39-2 and a Maelstrom pretty much did the job. And so off we moved past that painful experience. If he had kill points, he would have gotten another 15, which actually still would have equated to a 20-0 win, but it would have been a lot more engaging for him to not just, sit there killing things for no value.
Yep.
The fourth game was against a lovely, lovely guy. He's the captain of Team Denmark, I think. And he was super cool to begin with. But he had a Tyranid army. He had 3 Flyrants. He had like 60 Gene Stealers, 2 big Hive Guard units, or 3 big Hive Guard units. And then he had some assorted other, like Rippers and things like that. And that list was kind of just a mismatch. It was the only list where like I wasn't winning because I was doing something clever or playing the mission correctly. It was, I have mortars and las guns, but those actually do really well against Gene Stealers.
They really do. And then they also throw out those, if you were playing against Spore Mines or whatever, like just random couple of las guns, make those almost irrelevant.
Yep. And then they also, the catechins so the Gene Stealers ran across the board with the super moves and all that and did the charges that they needed. They were cracking. And they killed lots of stuff. And then, 10 catechins would go in and kill like 10 Gene Stealers. And that's not a sustainable thing for him. So eventually he had to throw the Flyrants, instead of just shooting and smiting, he had to throw them after things. At which point, again, about 70 attacks in my army that wound them either on rerollable 5s or on 3s and are D3 damage each, AP3, and it just... They can't sustain it. So that game was rough. And Slam Gwinius was a BA, as it were. There was a point where one of the jump captains leapt across the table. He had the Angel's Wing, so he ignored Overwatch, and he managed to get within 1 inch of 2 Hive Guard squads. So that happened.
Well, we're laughing like, how could he let that happen? But sometimes that's just they have to move, and it's
rough. That was rough. That was a bad part of the game where you go, how did that happen? And it did. And of course, plus 3 attacks on the D3 stratagem. So I threw 8 at the 1 Hive Guard squad.
I've locked up like 3 Basilisk with 1 Eversor Assassin before.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And you think, well, because the deployment zone was a certain way, and because there was some terrain a certain way, they all had to be, whatever just happened. But when you see it and you do it, those are the plays you have to make.
you need to see them, and that's maybe the best takeaway of that, like how to be a reliably good player is just making sure you're always thinking ahead so that you're not caught, running up against time limits and like trying to figure out what you're going to do in the moment because you hadn't thought ahead about it. So you don't have the opportunity to see the other plays you can make. So I was fairly rusty at LVO, and I was slower in some of my games, and I was really committed to not having that be the case turns here. And so that was the case. In each of my games, I think they went 5 or more turns, except for the first one. So after I got through that, I was kind of like, well, there might be a chance here. I was in 3rd for battle points. I thought maybe, the guy ahead of me on generalship had to lose because he had max. I had missed 2 battle points at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went up against an orc player, and we went back and this was a horde orc player. He had 180 models and a bunch of, Zag, Snark, and things like that. They put us on the Warhammer TV, and they gave us a chess clock after deployment. So that was interesting.
Oh, yeah?
And I left with many thoughts about chess clocks, which I'm happy to share after the wrap up. But, the chess clock was good for me. We both ran out of time in turn 5. We finished turn 5. And early in the game, it looked like there was no way on earth I could possibly win. I killed a couple orcs going first. I got a couple Maelstrom points, and then he was across the board with the jump and a bunch of Storm Boys and everything else. And it was, it was big trouble in Little China, where there's more of his guys than there are of mine, and mine are T3. And
they're there. Yeah, and you're beginning to have the exchange or whatever. Yep.
It's not a good exchange for me at this point. Yeah. But again, the sort of the hidden characters plus the number of attacks Catachan have and the combo squads are what ultimately did it. Is that I was able to, like, one Catachan squad ended up being 4 over the course of the game, and there were only like 2 left at the end, but they never gave up. Instead of 4 kill points, it was 0. And there were a bunch of, there were situations where I had dying Catachans holding up squads, which freed the characters to all pile into just a couple guys so they didn't get power clawed by interrupts.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, they would wipe out large, chunks of squads. By the end of the game, there were about like 13 orcs left. But he had gotten so many points early on that I did not get a 20-0 win on him. I think it was a 15-5 or a 13-7 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why when they told me I won, I was so surprised, because I was like, well, there's no way I won. I should have placed like 5th.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. I placed 3rd in battle, and I got max paint score, and that kicked me 1 point above the guy who was ahead of me on battle points.
I mean, take it. I mean, think about that, though. I mean,
no complaints.
I mean, it's you want great painted things at these events. And if you're going, it's getting rewarded and factoring into that particular award, then that's just the way it is. And I wouldn't downplay it at all, Mike. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. It was a good time, and I appreciate being able to chat about it and maybe give some people some insight on other ways to run Catachan and Guard too. I had no artillery of any kind in my list.
See, that's
no Bazzies,
strong. But that's playing into the mission set, I think. I mean, what if it weren't Maelstrom? Do you think you would have changed your list at all?
Nope. It was basically the same list I took to LVO. Right. Instead of 15 Sanguinary Guard and Ancient, I had 2 Shield Captains and the 3 Custodes by Captains and the 4 Tauroxes. And I like that trade-off. The Tauroxes were super valuable.
We've gone through this whole conversation with someone questioning the Tauroxes, and I still don't know why they're in your list. So,
yeah.
Tell me what's up.
And everyone said that to me, but the reality is they did 2 or 3 things really well. The first is nobody respects Tauroxes, and they're right to not respect Tauroxes. And I never, maybe once, let a Taurox end up with an enemy in base contact with it. So they never got tied up in combat because I was very careful with them, for one. So when 4 Tauroxes shoot in a turn, and they shoot, what is it? I'm going to do my math. They have 16 autocannon shots come out of them.
Mm-hmm.
It is depressing because they do nothing. But if you keep them alive, and if they shoot 16 autocannon shots 4 or 5 turns,
mm-hmm.
they dramatically impact the game by the time it's done. Because if you were to say, well, your opponent has some Orc Boys, or your opponent has some Hive Guard, or your opponent has some Plague Drones, or your opponent has some Orc Mech Guns, how useful would it be to have 80 autocannon shots? The answer is always going to be absolutely useful.
Well, even you mentioned being somewhat cagey with them and very strategic,
yes.
And is that towards the end of the game, your opponents will have a 1Z-2Z unit or something with 1 or 2 wounds left on it, and you want to be able to put some volume of fire on that to remove them.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example, game with Nick Nanavati that we did on his Brown Magic stream before the Villain GT. We had a really tight game, and it was kind of up for grabs on turn 6. And I had 3 Tauroxes alive, and he had a Demon Prince in a key position with 2 wounds left. So I put 12 autocannon shots at him. 1 went through the save, and that was that. So they're bad, but people don't shoot them, and people don't work too hard.
Well, they're tiny models. No one has any respect for them, like you said.
Yeah. So they just kind of They never did anything impressive at any one time, but over the course of every game, if you actually looked at what they did over the course of the game, it was like, you know what, that was great to have. And then they also protected catechins, and they made catechins have much bigger charge threat ranges.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay.
You get a 3-inch move out of the Taurox, and then you get, to the back of your base, and then you get to move, and then you get to charge. And opponents don't really anticipate that when they're playing. They kind of like, they see the catechins on the board, and then all of a sudden there's 40 more. And those are also catechins that can't be shot, which is very useful. And then finally, they move 14 inches. So there are a lot of times where you need to have a model near an objective. They can advance like anything else. And so, the ability to just zoom this kind of useless otherwise model where you don't really care if they don't shoot their autocannons. If you have a Basilisk or Manicore, your opponent will shoot it if you can. They'll touch it in combat somehow if they can think of a way to. But you certainly, even if they don't do that, it's rare that you can bring yourself to just forget shooting and advance your Manicore over to an objective.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things
discipline.
hand together. Yeah, well, maybe if it's out of guns, right? So, they were cool. And someone asked me, wouldn't you rather have 20 more catechins in place of each of them? And the answer was no, I'd rather not.
Yeah, I mean,
wouldn't finish my games anyway.
That's strong. I mean, that's a really good, I think, analysis or dialogue, I should say, of why you did it. And I'm not saying that things like Tauroxes should shoot to the top of the priority scale when you're making your target, threat analysis.
No.
But everything you described, well, everything you described are they are just simply things your opponents were not thinking about.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, in thinking back through it and playing some games since, it's right to not prioritize the Tauroxes, but in that list and just that right combination of things, they're just low priority enough to not deal with, and they're just good enough to be worth having. So it was kind of fun because they also made the list, like, again, one deployed every time. It was like there's 2 catechin squads with a mortar in ruins. There's 2 catechin squads on foot, forward, shielding screening things out.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 tanks that have guys inside them. There's a couple of heavy weapon teams. There's some sentinels. There's some scouts. There's some heroes. Every game, like, the army looked like an army on the battlefield. It didn't look like a weird cheeseball thing. And so there was a lot of value for me aesthetically, and then I never felt like I was playing some weird non-narrative, crappy list. It was nicely painted, it was good looking on the tabletop, and it felt like an army and played like an army where everybody was kind of doing something together. And so
that's my favorite kind. I mean, it's the same line, and like this. That's kind of the same mentality of the people that use a mono faction build. Is because they just want it to be a cohesive looking force and aesthetically be pleasing and play without compromising that element of this hobby. I mean, that's really what we're doing. It's a hobby thing.
Yeah, there's a reason we're not playing, StarCraft and like Zerg rushing or whatever. Like we're spending tons of money on our armies, so I always encourage people. Like, no knock to Daniel's Tesseract list. He was playing it just to prep for ETC and admitted as much. That list is not an army. It's 3 giant, like, weird, super heavy machines that spam mortal wounds and like a deceiver. And so it was funny to see the 2 armies against each other because on one side,
the lore.
Yeah, it's just like what is
not that I care about. I mean, I should say I do care, but not that I'm actually judging for that.
Yeah, I don't judge others. I would judge myself. And so
I make fun of people that I know, though. I make fun.
yeah, we'll make fun of it all day. Or like the what were they? The 3 fire raptors with Gilliman running around underneath them. That wouldn't be my choice. So it was good to be able to succeed with something that was interesting anyway.
Dude, that's awesome. You brought up another topic that we can hopefully cover later about just time in tournaments. Would it be cool if I reach out to you again sometime within the near future and have that discussion?
Absolutely, and we even added a time policy to Nova that incorporates the option for chess clocks based upon my experiences there and some other games I've had. So I'd be happy to talk about that. I'm becoming increasingly passionate about how to do it in a way that doesn't take away from what makes the game a game that we choose to play.
That's very important. And coming at it with those type of fresh opinions, I think anytime I've talked about it on the show is there are you can kind of look at it without kind of any of the sacred cow ideas and just really approach it with a way that, what is the actual problem we're addressing here kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you're on the right track. But we did mention Nova, of course, but I'd love to get you on and talk about that as we lead up to it as well.
Again, say when. And if the easy thing too, for anyone that's online, if you haven't checked it out, if you've never been to a con, Nova is a giant party. There are tournaments, there are seminars, but no matter what, there's always the charity lounge where every drink you buy is for charity. It's cheap. We have a 4-tap, craft draft beer rotator this year. We've got, live music and comedians. We've got all kinds of cool people. Jervis Johnson from Games Workshop will be there.
Oh, wow. Great dude.
It's going to be super cool. So if you have time, if you haven't signed up yet, even though the GT sold out, throw yourself on the wait list. Do some Shadespire or some Recon.
So there are other events too, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. There's 2,500 people coming. So check it out. It's fun.
That's amazing, man. Well, have a good rest of your day and a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Can't wait, Paul. Take care.
We'll see you.
FTN is also on Facebook. Please like us at www.facebook.com/Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to a very special segment of Forge the Narrative. I am Paul, your host. I'm joined tonight by Scary from the Scarcast.
Yeah.
Dude, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Master TPM. As we were talking about it, I might be the master of disaster, but you are the master broadcaster.
Well, you're fresh off a win with Drukhari, and, they are lighting up this tournament scene, so I wanted to have you on and talk about that, talk about your ideas about building army lists, talk about your success. But before we get into broadcast, your own channels, and on Twitter and everything else.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's like the main thing I do. It's Scarredcast on YouTube. That's SKARED cast. Mainly Dark Eldar content. Although I have been known to dabble, like yourself, with the Black Templars and my Talan, which I do enjoy playing as well.
Pretty cool. And you just won. What's the major tournament that you won?
Okay, so I just came back from, the name's rather long, to be rebranded to a shorter name. Yes, so it's the Basement Collective ITC GT, hosted by the guys from the Basement Collective up in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. This was a couple of weeks ago now, and it was a 64-person major.
Man, congratulations on that. I mean, with the way the edition is now, to pull off a win, you've got to have, of course, a little luck on your side, but you've also got to have some really great tactics behind this. And how happy are you to have the Drukhari be the powerhouse that it looks like the Codex is turning out to be?
The Drukhari have a tool for every situation at the moment, and I've been playing Drukhari for a very long time, and it's nice to finally... Well, not fine. Like I've always done well with them, even when they weren't considered quote good. Now there'll be all the players that are coming out of the woodwork because the Codex is so powerful at the moment. But it's nice. It's nice to be able to run up against some of these really top tier lists, and give very good players a run for their money. Being able to play an army that essentially I've been playing for 10 years, 12 years or so.
That's pretty cool. What do you think that the main strengths are of the Dark Eldar? Do you think that it's because they can grab objectives? Do you think that they've just got great guns? Is it both? Is it they can field 1,000 bodies? I mean, what is it?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, to be brutally honest. Drukhari have hit like a ton of bricks. They have lots of options that can do a lot of damage on the table, but they're surprisingly resilient with a high number of invulnerable saves pretty much everywhere. Feel no pain, or being able to ignore wounds, and incredible mobility in order to move around the table and win the objective game.
What is in your list that you took recently?
Well, there's two versions that I took to the GT. It was a 3-detachment list, a Cabal detachment, so Cabal of the Black Heart detachment, and it was 2 Archons, 3 units of 5 Warriors with Blasters, which are pretty standard, and I also had 3 Ravagers with triple disintegrator cannons, and 2 Raiders with disintegrator cannons as well. Then I had a Coven Spearhead. So I had a Prophets of Flesh Coven Spearhead that had...
Spearheads is the heavy support options, right? Yep.
Yeah. So I had 2 units of 2 Talos, which is like the floating dreadnought things, and 1 Kronos, which is like the support Talos.
Those are awesome, if you ask me. I think they are one of the standouts of the Codex for overall power and utility.
The Talos, 100%. Like Kronos are good, but the Talos is definitely more utilitarian, having more guns and having better attacks and things like that. But the Kronos kind of helps them all in combat, rerolling wounds, and can regenerate them and things like that too, which is pretty cool. And then I had... and the Homunculus comes in the detachment as well. And then I had a Cult of Strife battalion, so that's a Witch battalion, with Lilith Hesperax, a succubus with an Archite glaive, 3 bare bones witch units of 5 men strong, and a Forge World Tantalus.
What's the reason for taking Lilith? I mean, as a character, typically they're a little bit more points. What made you decide to include them?
Well, Lilith is only 30 points more than a regular succubus, and you get so much more for those 30 points. You get an invulnerable save. She can switch her combat drugs essentially, so she can be +1 toughness one turn and +1 attack another turn and +2 inches movement another turn. So you really pay for versatility. And to top that off, she is a character killer. We played ITC missions, and Headhunter is a thing that you can get where you get points for killing enemy characters. And she would just jump in because she's so small and kind of squeeze through bases and things like that, and go hunt out characters, re-rolling hits and wound rolls against character models.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and she's got like 6 or 7 attacks. And every roll of a 6 to hit becomes 3 hits. So she has like Tesla in close combat.
Fists.
Well, yeah, her blades, they're -4 AP, they're -4 AP 1 damage. So you do a lot of damage in combat. So she'd run in, just kind of nuke a bunch of characters, and then starting on turn 3, they're exploding 5s and 6s because she gets +1, being Drukhari with the Power from Pain chart.
You know, that sounds pretty good. Do you find yourself taking that character killing secondary a lot just because everyone's going to have at least 4 characters and you can get in there and get to them really quick and dice them up?
I didn't take it every game, but in the games that I did take it, she was pivotal in just beelining it to the characters and bouncing around like crazy. And there's also a Cult of Strife stratagem that allows you to attack again if you kill something, which means she could run in and potentially take 2 characters out in a turn, especially small support characters with only 4 or 5 wounds.
Oh, there's so many of those out there in lots of different lists. And I'm sorry, I may have cut you off before you finished the list.
Oh, that's okay. And then the last one was the Tantalus. That's it. That Forge World Tantalus, which is one of my favorite models of all time.
It's a beautiful model, but I haven't seen many people talking about it. So why is it in your list?
The Tantalus? Yep. The Tantalus is in my list because of the rule of 3. So I can only take 3 Ravagers, and the Tantalus is essentially about 2 Ravagers in 1 in terms of shooting firepower. And then you add the Cult of Strife stratagem, and it was potentially shooting twice per turn.
Does it still hold models? Is it still a transport?
It is. It carries 15 models.
That is a lot of Drukhari.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a lot of stuff in that list. And to be honest, just using it all in conjunction I feel Drukhari work best when you just use all the different elements and kind of bring them all together to create like this snowball effect, where the opponent doesn't really know what to target at any one time simply because there's so many different things going on at once. So it's still like a thinking man's army. You know, you can't just take Drukhari and expect to win because there's still only toughness 3 and toughness 5 and 6 vehicles, and they will die if you're not careful.
Is in absence of having just more and more Dark Eldar bodies, or like in the form of like 100 witches or so, you seem to have you kind of invested in some of these tanks and vehicles. And the basis of the ITC missions are, control an objective and kill something each turn, and it looks like you've got those. The capability of doing that. Do you think you'd make any additions or changes to your list if you weren't playing an ITC list and had to deal with more, I guess, maybe more linear objectives? I guess just without the ITC.
Well, the biggest thing would be, some tournaments don't allow Forge World. So the thing that you can kind of take in and out of the list mainly is that big Tantalus. And you can use those 400 points for a variety of different things in the list. But namely, if I were to play more of a generic style tournament format, I would usually try and take bigger units of cult, like witch cult, if I was running big 20-man blobs, or run them in raiders, or I would take coven units like racks and grotesques that are more tough, can be on the table, durable enough to take objectives, can create some board control as well.
What are your thoughts on racks? And just with the ability to bump up their invulnerable save to +1, do you think that would be more of a contender if maybe just people had more of those models right now? Do you think that the or the other options in the Dark Eldar Codex are just far superior to that? Why don't we see more racks?
Well, first of all, racks are completely sold out, like pretty much everywhere.
Well, that might explain it.
Yeah. So racks, it's very, very hard. Like I was able to get my hands on 10 of the plastic rack models. I've talked to people who want to get racks, so people are having to convert them and things like that. I think racks are a fantastic choice. I think that for 9 points a model with a 4+ save, toughness 5, and then the ability to come back into the game like with a Tide of Traders style stratagem, it makes them very, very useful in any sort of game.
I think that's a fair answer. So we might see more when the production catches up with the awesome rules.
Yeah, sadly that's the case. You know, you go and they make something really good, and then boom, it's all sold out, and people have to kind of improvise. But I have a feeling the Deepkin models will be finding their way to a table near you as Drukhari models.
That is a fair point. Those are also beautiful models.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
There's no real bad cult in the Dark Eldar in the Drukhari book.
You mean like all their chapter,
the obsessions,
their chapter tactics? Yeah.
There's no bad obsession. I think it's what they're all different obsessions, right?
Yeah, so you have there's 3 cabals, sorry, 4 cabals, 4 cabals, 3 cults, and 3 covens.
I get you. Sorry for not knowing all the hip Drukhari terms.
It's all good.
That's what you're here for. You're educating me.
Yeah. Well, that just means there's 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 10 different factions essentially in the Drukhari book.
Well, a good section of those is the homunculus stuff, and that's where you get the racks and the Taloses, and they blend really well together. I think like 4+ invulnerable save Taloses are pretty much where it's at.
I love Taloses. There's a big debate, grotesque versus Talos in some of the like competitive Dark Eldar scenes. I feel the grotesque is very efficient for the point cost and what you get. Toughness 6, 4 wounds, like beefy sort of ogre models. But the Talos just gets that added versatility, and I feel that in any sort of competitive environment, an anti-tank or an anti-infantry weapon, anti-heavy infantry or anti-horde infantry attacks in combat, the ability to fly, regenerate, the Taloses are great. And for under 100 points, you get a crazy model that is just super good. Looks
awesome. I know I've used the bits from that model for, 10 different Demon Princes.
Yeah, the whip coil, like for conversion purposes as well. Like I have a couple of converted ones, but there's just, after you put them together, there's still so much left on the sprue. It's great.
Well, they all different masks, they have different hand options and stuff. I mean, whatever you don't use for the model, it will make some great kit bash fodder.
Yeah, and because you can build out of one box a Kronos or a Talos, and there's a completely different set of bits for the Kronos and the Talos, and it's really easy to convert them to be either or and magnetize them, and then have they have so many different weapon options as well. It's pretty cool. So
that's a whole lot of value. So I know we talked about the list. We talked about maybe how you customize it for different types of missions. When you're coming at the table, are there any like relics or pre-game stratagems that you just know you're going to use that you feel like you have to use to be successful with the army?
Well, not that I have to use, but I do have a preferred like loadout per se. So my warlord for competitive play is a Blackheart Archon with the Labyrinthine Cunning. So essentially being able to, any command point spent on a 6, I get a command point. So, and that's for my opponent and for myself. And then he goes with the Writ of the Living Muse relic. So any Blackheart unit within 6 inches rerolls 1s to wound, which pairs really well with shooting and combat, which is great. Then
those guys have the poison weapons, and so you're wounding on a 4+ most of the time. Is that right?
Yeah, so it works on everything, even things like Dark Lances, Blasters.
I mean, no, it's reroll to 1s, but like all your foot troops and everything have, and the Venoms and things of that nature, if you are running, or were to run any, would all be wounding on a 4+. And so when you have that reroll 1 to wound, you really are upping your percentage of wound conversions.
Quite drastically, because it's better than a 3+ to wound, like statistically speaking.
That's kind of where I was going. Is that may sound like a subtle buff. Oh, he's just one of those guys that rerolls 1s to wound. Great, but when you factor in the Drukhari's ability to wound almost everything on a 4+ with their even basic weapons, I think it's a real big boon.
Yes, it comes in handy like a lot. Like you're using that reroll quite a bit. Makes it very efficient, which is great for any sort of competitive play. And then there's two other main relics that I like using. One is called the Vexeter Mask, which is a Coven relic that goes on a homunculus. And this mask allows the bearer to charge in and not suffer any overwatch.
Oh, that is so good.
Which is really, really powerful. I played a triple Baneblade list, and it was beautiful against 8 heavy flamer Baneblades, for example.
That is so rude.
Yeah.
It's rude to take that, and it's rude to do that to them.
And he also gets to choose an enemy unit within 6 inches at the start of the fight phase, and that unit cannot be selected to fight until the end of the fight phase, which means that even if a unit charges into you, or you charge into a unit, or multiple units, and you want one unit not to be able to interrupt your combats, you can pick that model or that unit, and that unit cannot get picked to fight until everything else is full.
Yeah, I can see how that stacks up to be pretty crafty and strong.
It's great, and especially in a world where there's Inari Shining Spear, the spears that want to jump in your face and whatnot. They get too close to that homunculus, and all of a sudden they're not fighting until all your guys are going to get to attack.
Until you killed about 5 of them. Right?
Exactly. So it comes really in handy. And the second relic I like extra is the Helm of Spite, which is one that can go on the secondary Archon. Allows the bearer to deny a psychic power like they were Psyker, so 24-inch range deny. And if they successfully deny a power, the Psyker that tried to do it suffers the perils of the warp.
Holy wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's...
And obviously that's your secondary relic, so you wouldn't burn that command point if you weren't facing any Psykers.
Exactly. So the main relic I have is the Rid of the Living Muse, and then I'm usually spending 1 point on either of those 2 relics. And if I really, really need it, then I'll spend the extra 2 command points to get both the helm and the mask, depending on what I'm going up against.
That's a big investment, or do you think that you're going to eventually just recoup those because of the other relic you have?
Well, this kind of ties into the one of the pregame stratagems. So the list itself that I took to the event started with 14 command points, right? You've got 2 battalions, your battle forge plus 1 for the spearhead. So 14 command points to start. The first thing I do every time we play is I declare an Alliance of Agony. It's a 1-point stratagem, where as long as your Archon is a Warlord, you can pick up to 1 Homunculus and up to 1 Succubus, and they can generate a Warlord trait. So the Succubus, for example, Lilith, would get her Warlord trait, or you can get a Succubus to be like a 3+ invulnerable save, or give her something cool. Then the Homunculus has a Warlord trait that gives him a once per game reroll on an armor save or whatever. That's like a free command point, pretty much. And it also gives the entire army an additional D3 command points.
Okay, I follow.
Right. So at worst, you're paying for 2 more Warlord traits and a reroll. At best, you're netting 2 more command points to your already have 14. So essentially, the army starts with 14 to 16 command points. And depending on what you roll will really kind of depend like how much I'm going to be spending on, pre-game stuff like relics. If I only pay for himself, I might just take 1 of the 2 relics. But if he goes up to 16, I might as well just get both if I need them.
It's like a free relics, essentially.
Exactly. Free relics, free Warlord traits. It really comes in handy. Essentially, it's just that pre-game. It's like a mini game pre-game, and it just adds added versatility to your army, being able to really see what you're playing against and have an opportunity to kind of tailor characters or war gear or things like that very specifically to the army that you're fighting.
So now you've got, let's say, conservatively 11 command points hanging out at the start of the game. After you 14. Maybe burn some.
Yeah, if I really do 11 command points, and that's, to be honest, that's all like 12 to 13 is good. But you put the Warlord down, and if your opponent spends any pre-game command points as you're deploying, you get to roll a d6 for each one he spends, and on a 6 you get 1 back, right? And if you put any Ravagers in reserve or put a Webway portal up or any other command points during deployment, as long as your Warlord is on the table, you're getting to roll, and on a 6 you get those command points back.
That's right. When you burned a few, you've gotten a few, now you're down to that 11 to 12 command
Yeah.
point type
Or
range or whatever.
Even 8 or 9 is just enough. You know, you don't really need that many command points once it's in game. There's a few stratagems that are worth a lot of command points.
Well, Cabal the Black Heart is one.
Right. Vect is amazing. That is the nastiest stratagem anybody
It's the best
will
one
have.
in the game.
It is so good.
That's my next question, though, is what do you find yourself spending? Now, obviously, Agents of Vect is 3, and you're going to burn it whenever you need it. You're going to do it whenever you need it. But in absence of that, what do you find yourself kind of trickling your onesie-twosie command points on during the game?
Well, there's a couple of nice ones I like. I'm a huge fan of Cruel Deception, allowing a unit to fall back and act normally, right? So being able to fall back and then charge or, shoot or after they've been locked in combat. So that's one of my favorite ones. It's 2 command points. Screaming Jets is my biggest one, being able to deep strike Ravagers and Raiders during deployment. It's 1 CP for each one that you put into reserve, which is really handy. And then there's the odd one, like Crucible and Malediction will happen once in a blue moon if my homunculus can get within 12 inches of like 3 or 4 psychers to try and do as many mortal wounds to them as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then
you find yourself up there with like 2 Primaris psychers or something, and just
you throw them up there and try, especially if they've taken a Perils of the Warp or something, and you're just hoping that you can nuke him with that like 2 CPs worth, right? Mm-hmm. And who knows, you might get you might even get 1 CP back if you roll a 6, and then it's a 1 CP.
You finish off Magnus or something.
Right, yeah, right. And so it just comes in handy. And then the other one I like is Black Cornucopians, where you can remove a unit of racks from the table, bring them in on any board edge at full strength again.
I bet would be really frustrating to your opponent that just spent all that time getting rid of those racks.
100%, especially when there's only 1 or 2 racks left. And it's later in the game, and they've been trying to deal with these toughness 5, like 4+ invulnerable save, 6+ feel no pain models, and you suddenly remove the unit and put it right next to their objective in the backfield and charge in because of the reroll charges, thanks to Dark Eldar, and hitting on 2s, and they're fearless on turn 4. It adds up. It adds up a lot.
Dark Eldar are a threat. This is a menacing army you're describing.
Well, don't even get me started, but Power from Pain, like the dynamic of the whole Dark Eldar army as they buff up as the game goes, like just makes the army go from okay to just incredibly good as the game goes. The last one I like using a lot is you can regenerate Taloses and Grotesques, so a homunculus nearby can just heal D3 wounds. That's another one of my favorites.
And that's a stratagem?
Yeah, that's a 1 CP stratagem.
Oh, so yeah, you can, as long as you're strategic with them, kind of meter those out and really, produce some dramatic effects or things that get you out of tough spots as the game goes on.
Well, a lot of people will shoot at a Talos and, find out that a Talos is 7 wounds, and toughness 7 because the homunculus is nearby. And they'll bring the Talos down to like 1 wound remaining. And then your homunculus will go and heal it up, halfway again. And it's just frustrating to your opponent to have to deal with it again.
Gotcha. So what's next for you? What's the next thing you're doing? Oh, actually, before we get to that, you run a Grand Tournament event every year.
I do. I run the Barrie Bash, which happens the last weekend of February, in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. So this year we went up to a major, which was fantastic. We had 64 players, signed up. And, we had Josh Death actually won the event. And he came up from the States, and there was it's gaining traction. So
I know I've got some good friends that go to that event. Val Heavenfinger, Jeff Osborne.
Mm-hmm. It's become like a feature event. There's a lot of bigger events in Canada now that are happening, like the Capital City Bloodbath is happening in August, and that's up to 110 players already, with room to expand to 130 if we need to.
We will talk about that
more, depending on how many people sign up.
Yeah, as we get closer. No, so we'll definitely talk about more about your event as we get closer to February. To let people know when they can sign up, when they can start, what they can expect. It's 6 months from now, or I guess I don't know when you'll open up signups, but it could be a different world we're living in once all the codexes are released and everything's out. And
with these new nights and with just everything that's being released, it's crazy good. But the next event, I also run an event called the TGX, the Tabletop Gaming Expo, and I run the 40k GT that's happening. That is the end of July, and that's the 21st of July, that weekend. And it's in Toronto, Ontario as well. And Val's very, very big, he's very involved with the event as well.
He's mentioned that to me. Yes, I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So that one's going to be really good. Like, we're almost sold out. If people want to go check it out, it's tabletopgamingx.com. And it's a 3-day convention. There's lots of different events like War Machine and like Infinity, and I think there's also the Hobbit. I think maybe even they're doing like a Hobbit event, and then the 40k event. I ran it last year, again running it this year, and I'm really excited because there's some like 40k events are getting big and they're filling up quick, and there's good competition.
Man, it's so great. I mean, this is what we wanted a couple of years ago, and it's really nice that the game is approachable and fun and appealing to a lot more people, and so we get these thriving tournament scenes.
No, I 100% agree. Like in the last, 6 months, just even 7 months, there's been such a movement towards going to events, and like there's such diversity at different events. Like, you might see 5 Dark Eldar armies at an event, but each Dark Eldar army will be almost completely different. You go to, there'll be like some elements, but it's just nice to see variety even within factions, which is kind of cool.
At the Slugga, last weekend at the Louisville Slugga, me and the Bourbon Brothers ran this grand tournament, first one in that area, and there were a little over 40 people registered and a little over 35 unique armies.
Right, exactly. And that is really cool. So, right now, in terms of and it's one of the reasons, coming back to the Drukhari point, that I feel Drukhari is so strong, because they have so many different things that will let you deal with so many different types of enemy armies that you face in the competitive environment. And as long as you know how to kind of put all the elements together, you can make an army that's not hamstrung by any one matchup.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I need to go back and listen to my Drukhari review to see if I properly predicted this, but I don't think I did. I don't think I predicted it was going to be quite this much of a counter, as much of a foil to what we see out there right now, and to be able to really dominate some tournaments.
Right, we're easily I'm trying to think of the word here. We're easily underestimated, face to, you know what I mean? It's an army to easily underestimate, but you'd be foolish to just think that it's going to be a breeze.
Before we wrap up, what's on your painting table right now? What's your next project you're working on? I'm
working on a 2,000 point list, with a lot of racks in it. So I have a lot of racks to paint up. So I've got to prime about 13 to 15 racks to paint up to add to my existing ones. And I have to touch up all my grotesques, finish a couple of talos, and then just finish some highlights, and things on some of my raiders and my ravagers. Cause I'm trying to bring my army up now that I have a set list that I'm really enjoying, bring my army up from that, decent standard to that extra level, with your extra segment, just spend an extra 5 minutes on the model, and that extra 5 minutes
moves. That's what
exactly.
I mean, I don't know a tournament player that paints their own models that doesn't do that. They'll go and repaint a whole squad just to realign it, get an extra point out of the rubric or something.
Right. And so being a tournament player, I've usually just painted my army for utility more than anything. And so everything's 3 colors, washed, a couple of highlights. It looks good, but it doesn't pop as much as I want it to. So now going back and redoing and a lot of the things and just kind of making those highlights pop and doing some battle damage or, get glowing effects in combination with finishing a massive display board that I'm building using the new webway gate, which is going to look really cool.
I bet. Well, Scary, they can find you at Twitter, at SKARI2 on Twitter.
Because there was already a Scary, apparently.
You got a fan. You got another fan.
Yeah.
And on YouTube at the Scardcast, SKAREDCAST.
That is correct. You can go over there, like, share, subscribe, whatever. It works. I put a battle report up pretty much every week and talk about tactical stuff. I also have a Patreon page, and right now I'm saving up to go to Croatia because I'm part of the Canadian ETC team. So all of that is going to help me get to Croatia.
Well, good luck. We'll have to catch up again after the Toronto Gaming Expo and as we get closer to the Barry Bash. Sorry, is the Berry Bash?
Yeah, the Berry Bash. Yeah.
As we get closer to the Berry Bash, and we'll see how you guys did in the ETC.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know Geoff is looking forward to the ATC. You know, we went to an RTT this weekend, and he was practicing with his ATC stuff that he's taken down. So he's excited about that. And hey, I love the podcast. You guys are amazing. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Thanks a lot, man. Speak soon. Have a good night.
No problem. You too. Thank you.
Forced Narrative is brought to you by Dicehead.com. www.dicehead.com. Games, hobby, supplies, and comics. They have it all.
Hey everybody, we are back. Thanks for hanging in. I think the insights from those guys, we talk about, we of course talked about Mike's London Grand Tournament experience, and then Scari's Grand Tournament experience. It's really cool to hear their insights. Hope you all enjoyed it. I want to talk about the Endless Spells for Age of Sigmar. This is, of course, out of the Malign Sorcery box set that goes up for pre-order. I think it's up now and for release on the 30th. And you're going to want this box set. The spells go together in minutes. And I want to talk about a couple of what I think are the more powerful ones right now.
The first thing I saw when I was looking at that box set, it wasn't, oh, hey, let's do this in Age of Sigmar, which of course I think is cool, but I just wanted to make a librarian floating on that burning skull, just riding around the battlefield on it.
Well, the endless spells, yeah, yes, they are cool, and they're some of the neatest models, especially for non-figure models that we've seen in a while. But the endless spells are things that wizards can cast, and then they become part of the battle. And wizards, not just you, get to manipulate them.
Yeah, I think this is probably my favorite thing about the new Age of Sigmar is it's the new magic mechanic where you have your magic on the table. I mean, how much more dynamic is it to actually be like, there's the spell that I cast, and to pretend you just shot my mind bullets at someone, and it just consisted of...
and all that stuff are still there. These are in addition to. These are extremely powerful effects that you evoke on the battlefield. But they're also, they could be dangerous to you. Because once they're on the battlefield, until they are dispelled, or if they're predatory spells, they're moved off the battlefield or whatever, they can be taken control of by an enemy wizard. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of armies out there right now that are really wizard heavy too. So that's why it's the risk reward system showing there, and that's a good balance to it. The Sigmar or Sigmarines or whatever you want to call them, they now have an entire cast of wizards. But Tzeentch lists are still extremely strong, and there's a few other lists out there that are really wizard heavy. So this is going to be something that you're going to see on the table in tournaments quite often. It's
going to enable wizards to be stronger too. I think there was a problem I shouldn't say a problem. There was some inefficiencies in being magic heavy with like range bands and that kind of stuff, threat ranges, but I believe that's also going to change a little bit with some of these endless spells. And what they do, again, they put something on the battlefield, and then some of them have the ability to they're either controlled by the person's player turn, that's the predatory spells, or things like wizards can interact with them during their own hero phase. So let me talk about this. The chronomantic cogs. In my opinion, this is, again, as a bit of a novice on the competitive side of Sigmar, this is one of the most powerful spells, if not the most powerful endless spell in the set. This is, you summon the chromantic cogs, has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, set up a cog model wholly within 12 inches of the caster. In their controlling player's hero phase, a single wizard within 9 inches of this model may manipulate the cogs to increase or decrease the flow of time. Anytime you hear increase or decrease the flow of time, you probably should expect a powerful effect after that.
The hairs on my arm stood up as soon as you said it.
They may do this.
I already heard what he said as soon as he cast the spell. I'm just waiting for you guys to catch up.
That's right. They may do this in the same phase the cogs are set up. If they do so, choose one of the effects opposite. The effect lasts until the next hero phase or until an enemy wizard chooses to manipulate the cog. Speed up time. Add 2 inches to the move characteristic of all units on the battlefield. In addition, add 2 to charge rolls for all units. units on the battlefield. That's not units within 6 inches. That's not units within 18. That's all units on the battlefield. That's one of the abilities.
Yeah, so don't cast that if you're playing against a Khorne list.
Do cast that if you're running a marathon, because you want that over with.
I thought this was one of those things that would be great for undead. If you find a way to get wizards in armies that wizards shouldn't exist in, I think there's a real powerful effect. And then the second ability, the slow down time ability, the wizard manipulating the cogs can cast one additional spell in this hero phase. In addition, reroll failed save rolls for that wizard.
That's super strong. I like that one more, actually.
Wizards aren't known probably for their high armor, of course, unless you're dealing with one of the new Stormcast cast. Wizards that cast Stormcast from the Chamber of Casters. They cast spells.
Listen, that concept, you know me, and I won't say power armored, but armored wizards. I'm sold.
Yeah, no, they look cool too, as we talked about. But the slow down time ability with the reroll fail saves, it's any save. It's it could be a ward save, any type of invulnerable save or a cover save. Cover gives you the +1, and cover helps, so it's rerolling that save. You were going to, I think, get a lot of mileage out of this spell. Now, all the spells come, they cost points. We'll go into the points and stuff when we talk about the General's Handbook. But this is, you have to pay for these things, but you can cast them as many times as you want when you pay for them, up to the rules and limits of the endless spells.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool mechanic too when you think about it, where something as grandiose as the spell is supposed to be is affecting the whole battlefield. That's unique. We haven't seen this in anything else that I can remember. Maybe like outside of the demon chart, when what was it called? Soulstorm or whatever. I can't remember what it's called now. But, it's such a dynamic warp storm. How did I mess that up? But it's such a dynamic thing to think about when with your list design and your tactics and stuff going forward for the competitive side, because giving 2 inches to charges and movement to the whole battlefield changes up your whole thought process of how that matchup is going to go, especially with the double turn. That's where I think you're going to see a lot of the bigger haymaker things that happen when it comes to this specific cog spell.
The Umbral spell portal is the one I want to talk about next. This is one of those things that I think is going to enable wizards to be to have an even a bigger role on the battlefield, in addition to these powerful effects. But then this extends their range. So you summon the Umbral spell portal on a casting value of 5, so not hard.
Yeah, that's low.
Yeah, if successfully cast, set up the first Umbral Spell Portal model wholly within 12 inches of the caster, and then set up the second Umbral Spell Portal model wholly within 18 inches of the first. So this is 2 models. You put one 12 inches from the caster and then another 18 inches from that. Arcane Passage. That's the name of this ability. If a wizard successfully casts a spell while they are within 1 inch of an Umbral Spell Portal model, the range and visibility of the spell can be measured from the other Umbral Spell Portal model from this endless spell. If a predatory endless spell finishes a move within 6 inches of a spell portal, remove it from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere within 6 inches of the other spell portal model from this endless spell.
It's very Doctor Strange. I like it.
Yeah. This is the Empowered by Olgu is the next ability. If your battle is taking place in the realm of shadow, the second spell portal model can be set up anywhere on the battlefield instead of within 18 inches of the first.
Forgive me, it might take me a bit to get the names of the things right.
Especially the realms. Yeah, the realms, yeah.
But the realms is actually what I wanted to talk about, because not only do we have interactive magic, we have magic that interacts with the type of board that you're playing on. Well, board may be the wrong term. I'm not sure how that's going to work for competitive play, but I imagine there's some process, right, to determine the kind of battlefield that you're fighting on.
Yeah, you go through a bit of a rolling thing if you're choosing to play with that.
Right. And obviously that's a choice, but I imagine that will probably get used more than it won't. What do you think, Troop? You've done more Sigmar than I have.
I'm struggling to see how it's going to work in the competitive play, to be honest. I think it leans favor to one side and against the other in certain cases. So, it's really hard to determine list design. for that, and so I think a lot of TOs might not use it right away, but we'll see. I'm sure at like the RTT level, it's probably going to be very prominent though.
Well, I mean, this is one of those things to where it's these will be a toggles that the tournament organizers can, as we get more comfortable with the rule set, can work in or not work in. I mean, that's going to be up to them, and we saw that with previous editions of 40k. There were things would slowly work their way in as people became comfortable with it, and I think this game is going to be more competitive, and so some of the random things probably won't make it in the tournament packets for match play, but I think it's way too early to rule anything out until we get more experience with the whole game as itself.
Right. I think as it stands, and this is just my opinion, if you're going to use the realms, I think you really have to put a lot of focus in your mission design, more so than ever. And that's just my opinion. I don't think that they're game breaking by any means. I just think that it's such a random element that can change things in a almost feel badsy way.
Well, in the malign sorcery box, I was said there comes with all these relics and all these spells that are from certain realms and stuff. It's a pretty big part of the game, if you ask me. So that's what I'm saying. We'll probably see it come in there. The third one I want to talk about, and this is the last one we'll talk about right now, is the prismatic palisade. In my opinion, the ones I've gone over are the strongest of the endless spells. Now, everyone's talking about Purple Sun, but they're talking about it because it's an awesome model. It's one of those, it's a lot of points. Remember, you have to pay for these. The Purple Sun is like 100 points. So it's a big investment.
Yeah, it's a whole battle line unit.
We'll talk about that in a second. But the Prismatic Palisade, you summon it on a 5. So these are all very easy to get up. At the start of each turn, this is the Blinding Light, roll a dice. For each unit that is within 6 inches of this model on a 5+, subtract 1 from the hit rolls for attacks made by that unit until the end of the turn. So that's a little bit of one of those big of a double-edged sword we're talking about. And then the Dazzling Brilliance. A model cannot see another model if an imaginary straight line 1 millimeter wide drawn from the center of its base to the center of the other model's base passes over this model. So I think this is one of those ways that you can kind of block off a large portion of the battlefield from hitting a unit that's on an objective. Your wizard, for instance, he becomes out of line of sight, but he also pops down the portal. And so Nagash, for instance, is behind this palisade with a spell portal, just rocking faces.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. Like, how much? Well, we'll talk about that in another show. Never mind.
Yeah, and the palisade, it's one of those powered by Hish. If your battle is taking place in the realm of light, add 1 to the rolls made to determine if the unit is affected by this model's blinding light ability. So if you're playing in that realm, it's worse for you if you set it up near your own models.
Yeah, it's still so cool though that you can just you're basically cutting off the battlefield from your opponent. And shooting is very prevalent now more than ever. So
this thing is not too incredibly large, but it's about 6 inches wide. So
yeah, that can work though.
Yeah, when you're only having to draw a millimeter line from the center of somebody's base.
Yeah, I like that. That's probably in my opinion, that's probably the most fun one, just because there's so many different uses for that, and I think that's going to be where you see, especially at the top end of play, you're going to see people using that to great effect.
It's a bit of a spoiler. They just pop it and lock it down. Like, sorry, 40 archers can't shoot this guy or shoot this unit.
Yeah, I love it.
And again, you have to pay the points to get the spell and then cast a spell, but it's not that difficult to cast on a 5. And that's it. These don't really have high casting values. I think the cogs are the ones we've talked about is a 7.
That's a little on the higher realm, yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple others that are 7s, but I think for it's got an upside that's pretty darn good.
Yeah,
if you ask me.
Yeah, they did a heck of a job with writing these rules and stuff like that. All these things they're making the game a lot more fun and engaging, and that's really what I think at the core of it. I think that's what Age of Sigmar lends itself to be. Is that it's a fun, dirty, gritty, engaging game. Yeah,
and we can talk, since I brought up the Purple Sun. Purple Sun is one of those predatory spells, which means that in each of the hero phases, it's controlled by the controlling player. So if you throw this thing out there, it's potentially then taken over by the enemy and used against you.
That's one heck of a dodgeball.
Yeah, and it's a swirling death, That doesn't sound bad enough. When this model is set up, the player who set it up can immediately make a move with it. So you cast it, put it down, and then move it. So you're ideally getting it out of your range or out of something that they can push back on you immediately. But again, that whole double turn thing that we're talking about. And then end given form. That's its attack ability here. After the model is moved, each unit that has any models it passed across, and each other unit that is within 1 inch of it at the end of its move is subjected to the Purple Sun's baleful energies. For each unit subjected to the baleful energies, roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in that unit. For each 6, one model in that unit is slain. If the unit has wounds characteristic of 6 or more, it suffers 2d6 mortal wounds instead.
It seems like a great way to put the hurt on some monsters.
Yes, subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic of all units while they're within 6 inches of this model. So that's another kind of insult to injury. And if your battle is taking place in the realm of death, this model can move 12 inches instead of 9.
Rude.
Yeah, so you cast it, set it up within 6 inches of the caster, and move at 9 or 12 if it's in the realm of death, and then hilarity ensues.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
But there's a bunch. There's a bunch of spells. We're only talking about 4.
Yeah, I don't know what the giant pendulum spell is. If it's no good, I'm going to turn that into a Demon Prince weapon.
That's the Aether Void Pendulum. And yeah, we'll definitely talk about this. We'll talk a little bit about them on the next show, and hopefully have some sample list. I'm going to field out to some Sigmar experts and get some sample list. And we're going to have a segment on the show coming up where we specifically address the battle line units. And so if you're getting started with Sigmar, what are maybe the best options? Not every army has a lot of different options for battle lines, but some of them have things that you can unlock as battle line. You're essentially what are troop choices in 40k. If you take certain leaders, and we're going to do a segment specifically on the viability of the battle line units and which ones you should be focusing on, especially if you're getting started with any specific factions.
They are the key.
Yep.
This is, you want the core of your army. Like, for instance, I went with the Deepkin, the Ironith Deepkin recently, and they get to unlock the Eel Riders. You've seen the models, you might not know, the guard models, that, you take a certain character, then you unlock them as battle line.
Hiking Vulture or something.
Yeah. Also play Sylvaneth, and they've recently got, over the last couple of General's Handbooks, gotten some additional battle line troops. So this is going to be a topic that, how do you get going? Because you're going to need these battle lines as you're building your armies, and I think it's going to be a fun topic.
I look forward to it. I mean, for Kharadron Overlords, the battle line part's pretty easy, but I am also very interested in the new Magic Sigmar dudes, so I've been looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, one of them a couple of them look really awesome. Like these new models, and even in the Soul War set, it comes with the Nighthaunt guys and the Stormcast guys, and brand new models for both sets. And I tweeted about this, but everything about this release is satisfying. It's cool to hold. It's got a good feel when you open it. Like even the Soul Wars box comes with a full rulebook in it. It's not a mini rulebook. It's a full hardback rulebook. And so it just feels real satisfying to hold. And then when you open it and see all these amazing models.
Yeah, I was in a local store yesterday doing some browsing and actually managed to find like a Deceiver Catan in stock, which was amazing. But the guy at the store was painting up that box set, and gosh, it was all over the front desk, like just getting everything out, getting everything put together, and everything painted. It was a lot.
I'm going to take a look at the new paints that they're putting out for the kind of give you the haunty spooky flesh. It's going to be, I'm curious to see how that goes, because, we focus on, or I focus on, kind of talent in a bottle type thing. And that looks like it's in the realm of talent in a bottle.
Yeah, I got to watch it in application at my local GW, and it really looks like those, not the shades, but it really interacts like the nickelic oxide.
Yep.
Am I saying that right?
Close enough.
It works in that line where it leaves that white residue on top, fills in recesses with good deep color. It's green in this case versus turquoise. But it did. It looked very smooth, very easy to do. He had a big brush just slapping it on, and it looked like Picasso.
That's perfect. We'll definitely try that out because those models are like all the ones we've seen, and then that what is it, the Margolf of Grief? That is probably the most beautiful model I've seen.
The Mortarg?
Yeah, the one that's the ghost lady.
Yeah, the Mortarg of Grief.
Yeah. That is a sick model.
Yes, it absolutely is. I've already heard chatter of turning that thing into Satan figures.
No, yeah, I think that totally works. That's one of the places my head went because I feel like we have a dearth of cool looking Satan options.
Well, the one from the Ark is of course awesome.
Yeah, but you have to buy an Ark to go with it. You can't just buy that in a box.
Yeah. I think this is going to be a real fun release, and I know that of course we're a primarily 40k show on this, as well. I'm going to try to do some bonus episodes to where we do it with the Sigmar content, so people can pick and choose what they want. We don't want to overwhelm people with stuff. But this is, I think that the game itself it's been redesigned in subtle ways that make it feel like it's part of that same 40k game flow. There's still some things that are incredibly different about it, but you don't run into some of the kind of awkward moments that you did with the previous version. The whole game just flows in a very comfortable way from my playing so far, and it feels good. It feels like a real solid whole game, and I think it's going to attract people because the rules are a little bit tighter and it's going to be easier to be competitive.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway is how the competitive lists before there was like 2 or 3 that were just super standout lists. And then, everybody else did fine. But, they just couldn't hold anything against those super powerful lists. And this is balancing things out so much more. And like you said, it's so many subtle changes that we'll talk about later. But man, it smoothed out. Like the combat phase to me used to feel real clunky. And now I don't feel that anymore. I was rolling dice, things went. We took guys away, and then we just moved on. I didn't feel like it was so complicated anymore.
Yeah, absolutely tighten those things up, and it was a joy to walk through and play, and I'm really looking forward to more games. So expect some more coverage of this stuff as we move deeper into the edition, and as rule sets and army lists start to come up again. We will release them as often as we can as bonus episodes.
Boom. We aim to please.
Yeah. Well, guys, those are the spells I want to talk about. We'll talk more about the points values and stuff for Sigmar and the General's Handbook and how everything kind of comes together on the next episode. That's when people are going to really be finally getting some of this stuff in their hands.
Sounds good.
Guys, you all have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, man. Cheers.
It's all in the reflexes.